Taranesh, you've just released the New Zealand Risk Landscape Report. We know that in business risks are ever changing. What's most prominent in the risk landscape right now?
I think that the key message coming out of the report is that it's a little bit of more of the same. We're coming off the back of a few years with some real challenges. There was the real hard shock of COVID, and then we've had a number of things cascading and building on each other over the last few years since 2020. Without being too doom and gloom, I think there are definitely challenges ahead for businesses in 2024, and that requires them to be focused and sort of focus in on key issues. Words like uncertainty, ambiguity, complexity, they're creeping into our vocabulary or our business vocabulary more and more, and those are sort of the issues that businesses are going to need to focus on.
Unprecedented is another word we could probably throw into that mix too, Taranesh.
Absolutely.
What are the most front of mind issues when it comes to risks that business leaders are really thinking about right now?
There's 4 key issues that come to mind. Economic slowdown and the slow recovery coming off the back of that. Climate challenges and the climate agenda. Cybersecurity it's been a major risk for a lot of businesses for a long time, all businesses really. That's still certainly at the top of the list. And fraud. Fraud's something that we've actually seen creep towards the top of the agenda more and more over the last couple of years. What we've actually done to identify what these key issues are is each year we carry out an annual survey of 500 C-suite individuals. That's done at a global level, and we take the temperature of what are the key issues that they're facing. These are the 4 top risks that have come to light in our last survey. What we've done in our New Zealand Risk Landscape Report is contextualize that and bring some of those issues home for Kiwi businesses and what that means closer to home.
And what are the mindsets that you're seeing business leaders adopt to manage all of those risks?
That's a great question. Look, I think some context that I'd mention here to start with is that business leaders are certainly feeling fatigue. There is a lot going on and there's a huge amount on their plate. As I mentioned, only a couple of years ago, we were still or just recently out of lockdowns in Auckland and coming off the back of COVID. 2022 was a very, very busy year. We saw inflation start spiking and of course interest rates followed. And it's been very busy for businesses to try and catch up with that lost productivity and earnings that they experienced in 2020 and part of 2021. That fatigue and that workload has flowed into 2023, and we're also seeing that now in the new year. With that context, the mindset shift that you ask about, really what that needs to look like is ensuring that we're conscious not just of isolated risks or issues, but we're actually taking the broadest picture that we can. What we've seen, particularly since COVID and the pandemic, is that issues that businesses are facing are cascading across each other and intersecting. So if I take the example of COVID, we had the initial shock and dealing with the restrictions and getting to grips with what that meant, particularly from a human perspective. That then fast forward and cascaded into supply chain issues. That then cascaded into talent issues when borders remain closed for a long time. And so that's kind of the trend that we're seeing year in and year out. So it's not a case of what's next on the agenda, but it's what else do we need to be mindful of and how does that impact all of the other issues that we're actively managing?
Absolutely. Let's focus on this year, 2024. What can businesses do to not only prepare for those risks, but to prepare for any cascading risks that may follow?
Look, at its heart, it's quite simple. It's about understanding and having a really clear picture about what your business strategy is. What's your purpose? What are you aiming to achieve? And where do you want to be in that 12-month period, 24, and perhaps a little longer out to 5 or 10 years? With a clear strategy, that then allows you to identify some really clear and tangible risks around what are those issues that may stop you from achieving your strategy. Once you have that picture, it's about putting plans in place. And the exact answer to what those plans need to look like are dependent on the particular issue, the business and the sector. But as a broad concept, if you know what the issue is and what you're aiming to achieve or stop from happening, you're more than half the way there.
The report shows that cyber risk and computer crime are one of the top 4 issues that executives say that they are least prepared for. Why do you think that is?
I think that's because It's a risk that's constantly evolving and changing. Speaking specifically to cyber, what we've seen over the last 12 or 18 months is that the technology available to hackers and computer criminals is ever changing and advancing. They're using tools like generative AI at the moment, and what that's enabling them to do is to infiltrate more businesses and to cause more damage. And so that's the wider context about why this is so much of a key issue. It's been an issue for a long time, and it's a key issue for all organizations, whether you're large or small. Of course, larger businesses or more public-facing organizations are more prone to these sorts of attacks, but it can and very often, unfortunately, does affect all organizations. So the reason that I believe that these business leaders are feeling least prepared for that is because it is constantly evolving. So whenever they identify an issue and take a step to mitigate that, there's 2 or 3 other issues that are in quick succession that they then need to deal with as well.
If it's moving so fast then, Taranesh, what can business leaders and organisations do to make themselves better prepared for those risks?
It's about getting the right posture. You have to have the right structure and framework in place to manage these cyber risks. And unfortunately, that is constantly evolving. Just like the risk factor, your response needs to be constantly evolving. At its core, it's about understanding what your vulnerabilities are across your system, what your architecture looks like, and then identifying what the key mitigations you ought to have in place are. Once those are in place and you have comfort that they're working, it's about getting that regular assurance and comfort that those controls remain well designed and that they are operating as you expect them to day in, day out.
We all know that ESG is certainly on the mind of business leaders at the moment, but they're all sort of at different stages of implementing ESG policies. What are the first few steps that you would recommend business leaders implement in their organisations on ESG?
I think the first thing that I'd mention, and this is a conversation that I often have with my clients, is it's about understanding and appreciating the difference between the ES and the G components of the ESG agenda. I think we can, for an understandable reason, often quickly slip into the mindset that ESG is about climate risk. That is just one component of it, a very important component, but the social aspect and the governance aspect can't be overlooked. So the first thing I'd mention is making sure that we keep a broader view of the issue. In terms of how to address it and those first steps to take, it's really about understanding what's most important to your organization, and then it's about understanding what levers you have available to you that you can pull. What can you truly influence across what you do? Be clear on what you want to make an impact on. Take some actions closer to home and make a plan around that. Most organizations start with a materiality assessment. And then once you've got that level of maturity and you've got more control over closer to home, do organizations then need to start looking upstream to their supply chains?
Climate risks, we know, are demanding a lot more attention given the major weather emergencies that we keep on seeing in this country. How are you seeing that impact your clients?
That's a great question. I think there's 2 ways that clients need to, and certainly I'm seeing them deal with. There's the more immediate risk and danger that these events such as cyclones and floods bring with them. So a lot of organizations, particularly my clients, are focusing in on what their business continuity and disaster recovery plans look like. I think those particularly have been controls that have been looked at with the lens of, we need to have something in place, but we'll probably never use it. Unfortunately, we're seeing in an increasing level that actually these events do happen, and they are happening quite frequently. So you have to have that plan. It has to be fit for purpose so that you can put it into action when you need it. That's the first more immediate response. The second is about what does the longer term climate change look like for your business, for your industry, and for the wider economy. And then what can you then do, and what steps can you take to address that?
A lot of risks for business leaders to manage at the moment, so where can they go for further support?
People should head to our website. There you'll find a copy of our New Zealand Risk Landscape Report. You'll actually also find our Global Risk Landscape Report there, and a lot of tips on how to take stock of where you're at and what are the next steps.
Thanks so much, Taranesh.
Thank you.